You know what? I would say that pretty much it can happen at any time. And a lot of times, as I mentioned before, we think that it's not happening when in reality it is. Kids and young adults are under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of fears right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so we just have to assume that everyone is struggling to some degree or another. And so, just what's the biggest stress in your life as you're talking to somebody? What's really weighing heavily on your mind, or what are you thinking about? What's making you lose sleep over? And just try to have a conversation as best you can. And if it means that you have to visit with them several times, then that's what you do. Another friend told me yesterday he has one daughter that she just opens her mouth and everything comes out. He has another daughter, he'll take her to dinner. It takes an hour
Oh,
before she'll even warm up to him to say what's going on. And that's just the way kids are, right? And we have to invest in time and meet them wherever they are.
um, so is there a certain sign that you can like step back and say, okay, I better get you looking back into your time that you had near the end?
You know what? There really wasn't. That was so sad.
Yeah,
He had several things that kind of piled on him all at once. He had been in a car accident 2 weeks before. He was about to lose his driver's license because he had racked up so many points for violations, speeding, and then his grades were slipping a little bit. And then his dad had a talk with him, that parental talk at night. And I think he just gave up and said, why? Spring is a big time when people take their lives, and it might have to do with midterms, for
yeah,
school students, right? And so I think our kids need to understand from a very early age, no matter what you're going through, we can work on it together. I
yeah,
can support you to the best of my ability in some things, right? I can't do everything for you, but I can support you. And nothing is worth your taking your life.
yeah.
Poor grades aren't worth it. Losing a girlfriend or boyfriend is not worth it. Having a disagreement with your parent is not worth it. These are things that you need to start out really early on. And if your kids are a little bit older, have a heart to heart and say, hey, as a parent, I'm not always perfect. I don't do everything right, but I'm trying. And, maybe you could give me some feedback on what you think I might need to improve on. And
Right.
then, and then the hard part comes, we need to listen.
And ask them for solutions, I guess,
Yes.
might be a good
Yes,
avenue.
exactly. Exactly. So we can't always implement everything they might want, but we can
Well,
see if that's a possibility, right? They are individuals, and uh, we're they're going to do what they're going to do, right? And so we need to kind of support them as best we can, and just help them be the individual that they are.
well, and I think how we were brought up was a lot different than what's
Yes.
available now.
Yes.
And I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is don't judge. So, if they start telling you all this stuff, don't be there to judge.
Right.
Be there to listen
Yes.
and support them like you would a girlfriend or a friend.
Right. More as a parent, I've changed the way I parent now with my other children. I'm more to coach and guide them. I'm not there to be their judge or their dictator. I'm to
Right.
coach and guide them. And their choices, they might not always choose what I would choose for them,
No.
but it's their life. And I will support them as best I can. And if they say, oops, mom, I should have listened to you, I'm like, okay, well now let's make a different choice and choose a different road.
Choose a different angle or
Right.
yeah. I know with my kids, I used to suggest, what would be your solution with this, or something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
to have them start thinking for
Mhm.
themselves.
Because sometimes, there isn't really any good solution. So we'll let them think about a solution and maybe come up with something, and maybe they do have something.
It's so different than how we were brought up. It was almost like the wooden spoon came out.
Yes, exactly. It's very different.
So,
And we need to recognize that, you know, the pressures with social media on these young people, it's huge. And we cannot parent like we did before. We have to
no,
make changes.
no. I mean, I never had the wooden spoon, but I know I used to get it at home. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
all it was fear, really. It was
Yes.
a fear thing.
Mhm.
And I don't know, was there less suicides, 40 years ago?
You know, I'm going to say yes, but I also don't think it was really talked about. But I almost think so, because in the last couple of years, the suicide rates have gone up. Suicide is the number 2 killer of youth and young adults in the United States. It was not always that way.
Yeah, I would have thought it was car accidents or something.
Yeah. You know, the first one is accidents. And then the second group is suicide. And that's heartbreaking because those are deaths that could be prevented.
Yes, absolutely. And they're from the nicest families.
You know
You
what? And
know?
sometimes I was talking to a therapist yesterday, and a lot of times it's the people that are this perfectionist, right? They think they have to be perfect. Um, they can't just get an A; they have to get 100%. I mean, seriously, when is everybody 100% in everything, right? It's not possible. And so you have these kids growing up, and the pressures their parents and society put on them, they have to be the best at everything. And it's too much pressure.
Yeah. We don't realize how much pressure it is for them.
Yeah.
When you know there's something, what do you do?
So there are different resources. There's the suicide hotline. You can also Google, suicide prevention resources near me or within your state or
Area?
region, city. Sometimes they have some free resources, so it's always important to start there. Um, Therapy, like seriously, if there's some issues, just like you would go to the doctor if you're like, hey, my foot is broken or I have this pain, it's been there for a long time. You need to go and get some help, seek some help. Therapists, if a person needs medication to get their functions, their hormones, their functions right in place so that they can feel happy, fine, do it, right? There is nothing wrong with that. My father was undiagnosed bipolar until he was 50. We didn't really know what was going on with my
Oh,
dad, up and down. He took his life almost 7 years ago. And he had been on medication. It was on and off, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And when he took his life, they had switched his medication and it really wasn't taking effect. And so people are struggling, and if you are struggling, find something. There will be something if you can get the support to stick with it.
right. And I think the medicine is probably better now than it was
So
then,
yeah,
right? But
right,
it's so hard when the brain and the mind is a funny thing because no one can see it.
right,
So I know when I was doing my recovery, you could see your broken leg, and you could see how it recovered and how it was getting better, but you don't see your head.
right. And that's why I've just learned, give other people grace. You don't know what's going on in their life, and however they show up, just assume that they're showing up 100% in their ability to show up at that moment.
Right. No judging again.
Exactly. I got too much stuff going on in my life. I don't need to judge anybody else.
No, and I just said that on another podcast, actually. I said, we were talking about Ellen, the Ellen show. And I said, for all the amount of times that she's gotten up and pushed down and gotten up and pushed down and gotten back up again, she deserves a medal. And especially celebrities, they're left, right, and center all the time.
Right. Exactly. I would hate to live in that kind of spotlight the whole time, right?
Exactly. It's too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressure is even worse than us normal people.
Right.
So you can imagine, what people are saying, what they say. It's just like the teenagers, social media.
Yes.
Exactly. They like you one day and then they don't like you the next day.
Right.
No.
And it's so important for them to understand their worth is not dependent upon outside factors. And that's sort of important for us as parents to instill in our children.
Yeah, that's really important. And of course, I guess the last question that I would have is probably, how do you go on? How does a parent move forward?
Right. Well, especially, there's different areas of grief. My husband has not even read my book yet. He's struggling a little bit more than I have. I took up this mission of suicide prevention very early on, within less than a week of my son's passing, because I realized that I had the opportunity to help other children who were struggling. And if I could prevent one other parent from having to go through what my husband and I have been through, I will have changed the world and made a difference. And so I had to come up with a mission that was bigger than my grief. And by talking about my son's suicide and helping other people, it has helped me to heal from my father's suicide, which I couldn't talk about before. And it's helped me to heal from my son's suicide. And so I actually feel closer to him now than before his death. We struggled in our relationship. And now I feel very close to him because I feel like I'm doing something that he would want told, his story, that he would have made a different choice if he had been in his right mind.
Right. So about parents, I guess a lot of relationships, have you ever talked to any other, marriages that have had this occur?
A few of them, yes, a few of them. Basically, statistically speaking, for any marriages where they've lost a child, no matter what, SIDS or accident or suicide, the divorce rate increases in those marriages by 30%. So it's significant. And, my husband and I, we had to work on it. We had to really have some intense, open, honest conversations because we're each struggling in our own way.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't have so much to do with the marriage. It's just that you want to disappear. You're just hurting so very badly. And that compounds any other problems that might be in the marriage. And so it's something that we've had to actively work on, but I'm so glad we have, because we can understand the other's grief. We can understand and support each other. And we actually need each other more now than before.
So you either get closer or further away.
Yes. Just because you feel so empty and hollow, and you feel that just such a failure as a parent and as a spouse and everything that you've done in life, it just feels empty. And there's so many questions around this. And that's what I try to tell people, is that there is healing, but it's not easy. But you can go on.
I think I would feel like, someone ripped my arm off.
Yeah. It feels like, like your heart, like it's just like a big hole. Like there's a big gaping hole there, and it hurts, and it's heavy, and it's just really hard. And so not easy, but we need to go on because someone else needs us in their life. And that's what's important.
Or many people.
Yes. Yes.
As well as we need them. So
yes. We are so all interrelated, and I have come to understand that more than ever before. We need each other so badly.
What do you think the number one discussion topic is when people want to talk to you, other parents want to talk to you? What comes up?
So a lot of times it's parents who are just scared for their child, that they've seen some behavior in their child, or their child has expressed some things that they're troubling. What can I do? And so I actually, I was telling everybody about suicide prevention and saying this, and then they're like, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm like, oh, what can we do? So I actually started partnering with Dr. Paul Jenkins, and it's on my website where people can go and get resources. And we've got some really inexpensive resources there. There's also some free resources, just different things where people can say, I want to do a mental wellness checkup, or I want to do check out some of the courses that Dr. Jenkins and I have been working on for suicide prevention and for parenting, those types of things where people can get real skills and help to do a better job in their relationships.
So everything that I've done in podcasts, mental illness is definitely one of the top on the list
Yes.
because it's all around us.
Yes. And it's being talked about more. And then I think we're also seeing it more because of the pressures. It has to do with our environment, the food we eat, you know, the toxins in the air, just what we're doing with our lives. And also we're not as connected with our communities as you know, past 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was all based around the community. We interacted more with our families, and now we work, and now with COVID, we're at home in our little cubicles, right? And we don't have all the interaction that our former ancestors had.
And I don't know which is worse, you know, being away from the house all day and not being part of your family, or being with your family 24/7.
24/7, yeah.
I'm not sure, but what, and it's so difficult now with COVID because all of these same problems are emphasized.
Yes.
And if your marriage isn't 100%, you can imagine that 50% of us all divorced. So 50 and plus 30 is, you're already at an 80% divorce rate just from that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So,
And it's just a matter of supporting each other, of being willing to be open and honest. Because I write in my book, you know, about the 8th month mark, my husband and I, we had a real intense talk about that because he was just struggling. He could barely function. And I'm telling him, you know, if we can't even interact, what's the point of being together? And so we had to really talk about our feelings and how we were each struggling. And the interesting part was, it turned out we were both feeling the same way, but we never would have known it about the other person if we hadn't been willing to share.
and willing to work on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because it is an entity all on its own. You can work on yourself, and usually that helps.
Yes.
Too, but you also have to work on the other part. What kinds of things do you find that a man deals with differently in this? I mean, it doesn't have to be suicide. It could be a car accident that your kid, you know, is injured from, which happens a lot, unfortunately, or a ski accident or something. But we're all put in that same position. So what does the man, how does that affect versus a woman?
Oh, you mean what?
We've been used to talk about feelings.
Right.
You know, women do. We're brought up that way. Usually, you know, with dolls and that kind of thing, but boys aren't. And so is there something different between a man and a woman?
Possibly. I think it has more to do with the relationship that they have with the person. You know, that's why we experience grief differently, because how close were you to the person who passed away? In my husband's case, my son was literally my husband's best friend. They were best friends. And so he just felt like he lost a huge part of his life. And he would go to a therapist. Finally, you know, it took a couple months to get in there. He went for a few months, and the therapist really didn't do much for him. And so then I had him go to another person who does some special EFT, like there's some tapping and it's a different kind of therapy. It's very different, you know, and yet it worked for him, which I was so glad for, because he was carrying so much guilt and pain around our son's death, because he was the last one to have a conversation with our son Christian. And so that, and even getting him to talk about these things, you know, it took 8 months for him to even talk to me about it. So yes, whereas for me, here I am within a week, you know, on Facebook telling everybody this is what's going on, and I'm sharing and I'm open. And yet that is what's been allowed help me heal from this.
Yes.
And yet I can't push him to do that, because he's where he is, and I need to respect that.
Well, yeah, you're where you are, and he's where he is, and everyone deals with it differently.
Yes.
And after someone passes away, I find it very interesting how, you know, when I would bring a life insurance check by the house, I found it very interesting on how each individual household was always different of how they dealt with it. You know, some
Yes.
families didn't want to be in that same house. They wanted to get as far away from that house as they could. Other families had, you know, a shrine made, and you know, and sometimes even a bedroom. And they were always thrilled when they brought me to the bedroom and showed me that this was still exactly how they left it. And it's just interesting how everyone deals with it differently. And whatever, I guess, whatever makes your heart feel better is the way you go.
Right.
Because I certainly don't think, I don't think anyone, even Robin Williams or, you know, any particular person wants to create this explosion.
Right. This pain.
Yeah. And it's just knowing how to deal with it. And, is there anything else that you would like that that's all I could think of to ask about what birds would be thinking?
Right. Well, we went over it in the podcast earlier, which I think you're going to reference so people can, if they want more information, right, they can hear our much deeper conversation.
Yes.
So I just think that suicide prevention is huge. People don't want to talk about it. It's not a pretty topic, but the statistics are such that if you have not been touched by it, you will be, because it's so prevalent and it's just getting worse with the lockdown. So I would just urge people to be attentive, learn some things that you can be aware of in watching in other people, signs in other people, signs in yourself, and what you can do to prevent that.
And do you think it's a good idea to have your older kids become more aware of what is out there that way and look to see signs in their friends or the people they
Sure.
know?
And I would say it's age appropriate. It doesn't necessarily have to be older kids. Kids as young as 9 are thinking about suicide. So don't think that it's you know, just, oh, they turn teenagers. No, they're actually a lot younger than that. And so to have age appropriate conversations with your children, that you're letting them know you're not a burden. You know, if I ever made you feel that way, I'm sorry. And if you're struggling, you know, let's talk about it. And then have those weekly talks or a daily 5-minute check-in, you know, where they know, oh, mom's talking to me and we're having an opportunity to connect.
And does bullying make this worse?
You know, the bullying just makes it worse, you know, with the whole, it just affects their mental wellness, right? And their self-esteem. And so they need to know that you have their back and that, hey, let's just talk about it. What's your biggest concern? And don't rush in, you know, because they don't want you to go over and confront. Maybe that's not the best thing to happen. But say, you know, maybe we find an alternative situation where we take you out of this situation. There are so many opportunities now for different schooling or to change the environment so that you don't have to deal with that.
Or a different way to go to school, or a different classroom, or a different teacher, or what have you, I guess.
Yes.
Well, there's so much more that we could talk about. And I'd love to do this again next year and just see, you know, maybe you've come across some more stories. And the more we talk about it, the more awareness that we can bring to this and people to be more aware of what's happening. And for any listeners out there, if you know somebody who's by themselves or struggling, please pick up that phone or FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, or there's so many ways now to have that interaction and see how to touch base with them and see how they're doing. It's just so important, especially while everyone's so isolated, because it doesn't matter what age you are for this feeling to come over you.
Right.
And
I totally agree. So thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Lark. Thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you for all our listeners. And I really appreciate it. And we'll touch base again in the new year. And for everybody, this is Lark's book. It's down below in the description box for anybody who would like to get a good read in. It's definitely something that you want to choose to grieve, just grieving, healing and grieving. It's a natural thing, and even elephants do it. So I think we should learn a little bit from them.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lark. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for all our listeners today. I always end it with obviously a Carol Burnett ending. And I'd love for everyone anyone's listening to subscribe and like, share. Please share this, because for anyone out there that is struggling, if you know anybody that needs some advice, somebody to look at what is possible to help them, pick up that phone, pick up your tablet and give them a call today. It's absolutely important that we have more connection during this time. And our podcast, is every week. And if you haven't, it's also in the description box below with our great podcast that we had with Lark this week. So stay tuned for our podcast next week. And I really appreciate each and every one of you. Please subscribe to our channel to get more real life stories for you. I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Since it seems we just got started, and before you know it, comes the time we have to say so long. So thank you, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you. I set up my boxes here for Instagram on this side, so that's what those are on the outside for you guys. So thank you. Thanks, and see you next week. Bye.